Here we go. So thank you for having us. We are the team behind Wikimedia Enterprise, the long time coming, if you think of it in terms of the number of times and ways that the Wikimedia Foundation has been working on building an API or working with the commercial sector, particularly the higher volume commercial sector, proactively. But this particular team and this particular project has about 6 months under its belt, 9 months under its belt. And we've just recently come to the Wikimedia community with what we're doing for documentation and community discussions, with the product coming in another couple of months' time. So this is a really interesting moment to see how we're going about what I've described here as squaring the circle, how to work with the commercial sector and service level agreements in a way that is appropriate for the Wikimedia community ethos and culture. For this presentation, parts of this didn't load. Okay, let's try that again. Right, okay, so slide 2 isn't presenting.
Well, that's too bad.
That would just be right, wouldn't it? Fortunately, I have uploaded these slides to Wikimedia Commons already, so I will go to that. So I would like to introduce, for the purposes of giving this presentation, my colleagues Ryan and Lane, who are here in the presentation. Let me see if I can make this display properly. Of course, this always happens when you're doing a live demonstration. Right. Do we know how to make the make it full screen?
Zoom in maybe to the slide.
Right. Well, that'll just have to do, won't it?
We'll go with it.
All right. So I'd like to introduce my colleagues Ryan and Lane here for this presentation, starting with Lane, not to be confused with Ryan Lane, a well-known Wikimedia Wiki developer. Starting with Lane, our business developer, and we'll then continue with Ryan, the product manager, speaking respectively on what is the product from a commercial sector perspective, and then what is the product from a technical perspective, and afterwards we will continue with questions. So Lane.
All right, everybody, I am Lane. I will say that it's true that I'm used to being in most environments the only Lane in the place, in the joint, and here in the Wikimedia movement that has proved not to be the case. So it's entertaining for me. So as Liam mentioned, I'm the sort of business and operations person when it comes to Wikimedia Enterprise, which means that even when I know the answers to technical questions, I try to pretend that I don't. And I kind of want to just walk you all through the background and the thinking and some of the sort of like arguments and wouldn't say justification exactly, but kind of the framework that we're using to think about like how Wikimedia Enterprise operates and like sort of how we see its value, to the foundation, but really more to the movement broadly. So here's our basic thesis for thinking about Wikimedia Enterprise. So, technology companies, large ones, many small ones actually, rely on, or smaller than the sort of big ones that we all know and love, no strong word for it. They rely on Wikimedia data from many of the projects extensively. For one thing, it's the baseline for many organizations' knowledge graphs, which they use to power all sorts of products. So when we're thinking about, say, like the Big Five type companies, the FANG type companies, we're talking about their search engines, we're talking about their digital assistants, but even as they're starting to explore other spaces like augmented that the Wikimedia data is ending up extensively in those environments. And then when you really dig into it, you start to understand like, oh, these graphs are actually consumed and used in a variety of different environments. So there's they use it for maps and even for some geolocation work. They use it in their advertising platforms. They use it in their video platforms. They use it in their audio platforms. Really anywhere that someone needs access to a store of common knowledge, they're going to be reaching out to one of our projects, whether it's one of or all of the Wikipedias, whether it's Commons, whether it's Wikidata. All of these are seen as sort of differently valuable. The text-based projects, the knowledge graph, all of it. Use them in sort of different combinations, right? So depending on their size, depending on their goals, they've all kind of come up with different ways to access all of the information, all the content that's provided by the movement. This is both a sort of a strength and in some ways a weakness. So we can talk about why that's the case. Next slide. I'm liking this lo-fi manual slide change. So I like it.
At least it's not like an overhead projector.
That would be amazing if I could just be drawing with a sharp. We should work on that. All right. So so the challenge for not just the large organizations, but actually every organization is that maintaining access, third-party access to our data is actually very challenging, and in some cases very expensive. And the reason for this is that we have at no point has our sort of technology stack ever really been designed for third-party ingestion or for third-party reuse, right? Which isn't to say that it doesn't happen. It happens extensively, but it's never been really deliberately considered. And so what you see is that when we started talking to a variety of different enterprises, commercial enterprises that maintain third-party access to Wikimedia content on a regular basis, is that it costs them a lot of money. And a lot of time, and a lot of people have to work on maintaining these ingestion pipelines. The reason for this is that, again, we haven't really designed it in that way. So what does this mean? It means that we don't guarantee data quality. We also don't guarantee data access, right? Say, like, we promise that this API is going to be here tomorrow. We just say, hey, the API is here today. From a business perspective, that can be challenging. We strive to maintain data quality, but again, there's a difference between maintenance of data quality and a guarantee of data quality, because what businesses and organizations want is guarantees. They want to know that things are going to work the same way tomorrow and next week and next month that they do today. It's also the case that data is inconsistent between APIs and other methods of ingestion that we have, like our dumps. It is because they were developed in isolation and they were developed to serve specific non-commercial purposes. There isn't a lot of consistency. We don't have a standard format in which we deliver this data. And again, quite expensive to figure out how to make our different ingestion methods, third-party ingestion methods together. And then additionally, like delivery methods, when we say we lack clear indications of the data's actual value to the consumer, by which we mean the third-party consumer in this case, what that just means is like we don't, there are a lot of different ways in which commercial organizations utilize our data, and we don't really, again, strive to put it in a format that indicates that. We don't make it clear when an edit is a critical edit and when it's a small edit. In some cases we do, in some cases we don't. And again, we don't do that in a consistent way. The data can be really, really valuable when you're, say, a commercial entity that's ingesting all of this content into your own knowledge graph, and you want to be able to, say, prioritize between different types of data, or prioritize between things that are critical for updates and things that can be delayed. So all of these are small changes that we can start to think about making when we're looking at this through the lens of how do we serve commercial customers. And then finally, kind of a similar point to the first one, which is that, as we talk to these companies, what we've discovered is many companies, not just the big ones, actually put people on, have people expend significant time and energy managing, cleaning it, munging it, ensuring that it works consistently, dealing with any sort of like breaks in the pipes when they come down the line. And while there's always going to be some degree of maintenance that is required on the part of these companies, it's become clear that if we can do more work on our end, on the side of on the Wikimedia side of things, we could potentially allow them to put some of those resources to better use. So that last point kind of leads into this point, which is that if we can do that, if we can make it cheaper for these companies to work with our data by freeing up engineering resources, then they will pay. Additionally, if we can start to deliver this data in a way that is consistent as a platform with sort of with guarantees of reliability, promise of sort of like future developments that are going to further serve their needs, all of this lends itself to a business structure in which we sell ongoing and consistent access to this data in a way that's going to solve their problems and allow for a relationship that looks and feels more like the commercial relationships that they have with other data providers. And we believe that we can do this in a way that doesn't violate our mission. It certainly doesn't violate any of our content licenses. If anything, it strengthens it by giving us a contractual relationship in which we can strive to ensure that those content licenses are followed. And then again, sort of allows us kind of tune functionality and services to those specific needs. And the goal ultimately in all of this is to do this in a way that is consistent or consonant with the mission of the foundation and the movement overall. It doesn't denigrate it in any way, shape, or form, but actually allows us to carve out these specific customers, these commercial customers, and deliver something in a way that is valuable to them, that delivers value back to the movement, and that ultimately begins to serve our larger sort of 2030 movement strategy goals. Next slide. So here's kind of the metaphor we like to use, these lovely images from the Noun project. The metaphor that we like to use is that, like, if Wikimedia, the Wikimedia and the movement overall is a planet, we want Enterprise to kind of be a little satellite off to the side, something that doesn't interfere with the function of the planet, that doesn't get in the way of any of the sort of daily activities or daily routines of anybody that's on the planet. It's just kind of this thing that we spend a little bit of money to shoot off into space, and it's up there and it's rotating around, doing its own thing, and sort of eventually and occasionally delivering value back, or consistently, I should say, delivering value back to the planet, kind of off to the side of value out in space, right? So again, like, very much our kind of goal here is to figure out how to serve the mission and the movement, even as we layer in some of these sort of challenging or what can be perceived as challenging sort of commercial elements, because these are things that we have never because these are things that we've never really attempted to do before, or at least not at this scale. Next slide. And just, I mentioned we want to be consistent and against the movement strategy recommendations. So here are the two movement strategy recommendations that we are very specifically addressing with this project. And discussion about doing something like this predates the movement strategy, but this is the language sort of emerged through the strategy that that we lean on when we're thinking about how do we do this? How do we deliver in a way that provides value to the movement, commercial and otherwise, without interfering with the mission? So first is increase the sustainability of our movement. It's very direct. Explore new opportunities for both revenue generation and free knowledge dissemination through partner income. For example, building enterprise level APIs. So there you go. And then the second one is improve the user experience by making the Wikimedia API suite more comprehensive, reliable, secure, and fast in partnership with large-scale users, and improve awareness of and ease of attribution and verifiability for content. And we're really, in this case, we very much believe that we can balance both of these points. We absolutely can make it more comprehensive, reliable, secure, and fast in partnership with these users. And through that process, we absolutely can and are and will improve the ease of attribution and verifiability. These things go hand in hand. One of the things we have discovered as we started talking to third-party reusers is that in contrast to what perhaps was sometimes perceived, they really want to deliver against the content licenses. And sometimes it is more challenging than they would like for it to be able to programmatically identify the license that is attached to a particular piece of content and ensure that they can deliver against that. I see a couple questions, so we'll get to those in just a second. So just to give you a sense for what we are building with Wikimedia Enterprise, it is no surprise, given everything we've set up to this point, a data delivery platform that delivers what commercial consumers of our data need. So an enterprise level product to be released in 2021, sometime in the second half of the year, ideally on the earlier side of that. Baselined against existing methods of data access to make transitioning relatively seamless. Ryan will be talking about the product in some depth in just a moment, but you'll see that while we are building sort of a new API suite, it has relationships or callbacks perhaps to the existing free API suite, and part of that is part of the reason for that is to make it relatively simple to transition to the commercial platform, but also because we don't want people to be trapped on it, to make it so that people can transition back to the free platform when necessary. All of which is, the goal is to recognize that a lot of companies, a lot of organizations are already using our APIs. And so we want to recognize that the value that they get there, maintain that value, and then build on top of it. And the way that we see building on top of it is we're going to deliver that data with higher frequency, right? So as Ryan will talk about, we want to be giving access to exports or dumps of the data more frequently than the 2-week period in which we currently do it. Again, guarantees of reliability, which are critical from a business perspective, and something that is separate and apart from actual, related to, but separate and apart from actual reliability is the guarantee of reliability. And then better context. And what we mean when we say better context is just better commercial context. So a framing that makes sense to commercial and a delivery of this data in a way that makes sense to commercial organizations and is more consistent with the way that they're used to getting content programmatically from third-party providers. And then just a couple other things you should know about it. It's going to look, the Wikimedia Service, as I mentioned, is going to be a separate company. It's a single owner LLC, a limited liability corporate, a US-based corporation. This is largely a designation is largely for tax purposes, with the goal of sort of maintaining our the nonprofit status of the organization. And if you're curious about more of that, there's a lot more explication of kind of the thinking behind that on our page in Meta, as well as quite a bit of discussion on the talk page behind it. So what we're looking at is what we mean when we say it's going to look a lot more like what commercial providers have. We're talking about dedicated on-demand customer support as part of the contractual guarantee. So this is actually something that will be pretty new. Around here, this won't be sort of the traditional channels that these companies have gone to get access. They will actually be able to talk directly to our customer support team. A service level agreement that guarantees a reliable percentage of uptime. Again, something that they're looking for. And engineering consulting services to help customers get the most value out of their use of Wikimedia data. So these are all very consistent and common. So these are all very common in a sort of an enterprise environment, or an enterprise SaaS environment, or an enterprise data delivery environment, but very, very new for us. So before we jump to product, Liam, since I have a few minutes, should I try and address a couple of the questions that we've seen come up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you just read out the questions? So or I'll read it to you if you prefer, and then you can
let's do that. Perfect. And I should apologize. I have to jump as soon as I finish my presentation because I've been called into another thing, and also I've seen Ryan and Liam. They're good. I've seen it.
So the first question is, this is a fairly new effort from the Wikimedia Foundation with regards to the technical, commercial, and political aspects of the project so far, at least, which has been the most difficult, or I'll add also the most surprising.
Sure. I mean, I will only give I can only give my perspective, and Ryan and Liam may have their own. Difficult is sort of a strong word. I would say, like, the part that I would say that as a team we've been arguably most invested in is really figuring out how to do this in a way that's consistent with the movement and its values and its mission and its values. I would say trying, acknowledging the challenging aspects of the project, both real and perceived, frankly, has been part of this. And I think for us, I mean, I hesitate to use the word difficult, but I would certainly say I feel like it's where we've expended the most effort, is just ensuring and continuing to try and ensure that what we're doing here makes sense and isn't going to be sort of a net negative for, again, like the Wikimedia movement broadly.
Yeah, it was good. It was always a known challenge. That wasn't a surprising challenge. That was always important. I think you're coming from the business sector into Wikimedia, or the government sector, I should say, and I'm coming from Wikimedia. This is my first time being involved in a overtly commercial project. What's been interesting to me and surprising to me is, clarify, completely unsurprising to me, is that it's really difficult to quantify how to actually describe Wikimedia in a commercial capacity. And how do you walk into one of these companies and actually say, please give us money for the thing that you're already getting for free, and that you can still get for free if you want to. We're not turning that off.
Yep. It's funny, there's another question a little further down the list, just jumping ahead, that says, once the content is being paid for, will the customers, the enterprise supplier, start trying to call the shots over that content? So one of the things that we try and be very clear about with this product is that it is not a content product, it is a content delivery product, right? So what you are paying for is a different kind of delivery, and that delivery is more tuned to sort of commerce in the way that commercial entities operate. But we're very clear, we're like, you don't get any control over the content. We don't have any control over the content. We certainly can't give any control to you over the content. It's very much a take it or. And what we have discovered is that, especially for the commercial providers that already work with their content, there is that understanding already. So I don't think, we have not had much of an experience of anyone trying to call the shot. Just sort of shrug and say, great, good luck, go join the community and try and have influence through those channels. We can't do it. We can't help you.
There's a couple more questions here. With planet and satellite analogy, what is your response to the satellite being perceived or being, in reality or perception, too big? Is there a worry that enterprise will get too much money and therefore affect the, using the satellite metaphor, the two-body problem? Where's the center of gravity?
Yep. So we have made a commitment signed off by the executive team at the foundation that the income from enterprise will never represent more than 30% of the total income for the foundation broadly. And we're working on like how to sort of get that ratified in a way that is sort of, you know, legalistic and meaningful, but that commitment has been made.
And that the revenue itself goes into the movement. So things like the endowment or towards the annual plan. It's a bit like the fundraising process from banners or emails. That money goes into movement revenue, which then gets disseminated according to whatever the annual plan or procedures of the movement are. It's not like this money is somehow different in that regard.
Right.
It still comes under the auspices of the Wikimedia Foundation Board of Trustees and that fiduciary responsibility.
Yep.
The next question, and then we'll move over to Ryan for the more technical perspective. Are you currently working with some of the big tech companies to tailor their solution to their needs, or is this being developed in-house? I'll combine that with the question of, can you share the companies you're working with, targeting, or have contracts with? If not, how will that be disclosed, or will that be disclosed?
How about if I answer the first one of those and you answer the second, Liam? We are not working with the big tech companies, so the solution is being developed in-house. That said, we have done extensive customer research, not just with the big tech companies, but with a wide range of technologies that rely on Wikimedia content in a variety of different contexts and a variety of different industries, because our goal is ultimately to tailor this product in a way that serves commercial needs broadly, but not the specific commercial needs of any one company. Fortunately, what we're discovering, and through customer research and customer discovery, which is ongoing, if you've got a company you'd like us to talk to or an organization you'd like us to talk to, just let us know. What we've discovered is that like their needs are highly overlap. So go ahead, Ryan.
And I have something to add around that. It's to like a more technical angle to that first question around what has been the most difficult part so far. Oh, I guess it's not difficult, but surprising is like a lot of the problems that reusers face is pretty ubiquitous. It's similar things. And so as we did that customer research, it's documented on our MediaWiki page to an extent. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer more. But a lot of that work is like, a lot of people have trouble with wiki text or some of these kind of larger media wiki issues to people that aren't, or reusers that aren't as familiar with the Wikiverse as maybe we are, like kind of pointing to all the folks that are coming to this conference today. So I think that's been part of the interesting product challenge of it too.
I'm going to hand off to Ryan and thank you all. I apologize for having in good hands. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lane. To answer that, the second half of that question that was just given is who are we working with? Starting the primary, the the primary customer base for now is the biggest companies. This is the largest use case, but over time, trying to work with smaller organizations and trying to make sure that it actually kind of levels the playing field in the sense that currently, as Lane described, to work with Wikimedia content at this large scale requires a large amount of internal infrastructure and investment. Anyway, by providing this API service to any commercial organization to the scale that they need, kind of levels the playing field and allows organizations who aren't the biggest of the big to also join this game. We won't be able to talk about individual relationships because it's the commercial sector. But what we are doing is, along with that 30% promise that Lane mentioned, there will also be a register of all clients, all customers who have a commercial relationship higher than that which is considered a disclosable relationship for donation purposes to the Wikimedia Foundation. Currently, that's, I think, $250,000. If you donate more than $250,000 to the Wikimedia Foundation, the Wikimedia Foundation Board of Trustees have to personally confirm that, approve of that. We're trying to match that by saying, whatever that level is, if that changes, goes up in the future, goes down, we will have a register saying these organizations are customers to that level or greater, which is, I think, an appropriate level of transparency. We have a couple of more questions in the chat there for more technical questions, which I think we'll hold until after Ryan's talk. Otherwise, they might actually be answered directly in that presentation. So I will put the slides back on. And Ryan, over to you.
Sweet. Okay. Well, Lane touched on some of these points as he was talking, but I thought it would be helpful to go do a more technical dive into what we're actually building and where we're at. And I actually put some pseudo demo screenshots to walk you through kind of where the product is today and where it is heading. So first, I wanted just to give a general overview. So Lane described this as a data delivery platform. That's very much what it is. We are selling a very consistent and reliable pipe of data to our clients and customers, the folks that use this. That comes in kind of three simple APIs. The first is a Firehose API. Compare this to event streams, but with more filterability, a very defined JSON schema that passes a myriad of different, like, commercially interesting data points that are also publicly available, and also like lives with a stable connection. And then we also have a series of other APIs. One is the bulk content API, where you can actually download daily corpus exports or dumps, as we call them, of any Wikimedia project, text-based Wikimedia project. And you can actually download hourly dips of just those changes for every project. So the idea here is, since folks are trying to cache our content on their side or mirror it in order to use it to propagate a knowledge graph that fills a product on their end or a series of products, giving a pipe of data that allows them to do that more easily and to immediately nip some of the challenges Lane was describing with our current API suite is a large value prop here. So that's kind of where we're like chewing into the market, is on this data pipe. But if you go to the next slide, Liam, the stuff that we're going to do with this is focus on two major areas. Without reinventing too many wheels here, we want to talk about trying to make our content more machine readable for reusers. There's this kind of large meta point of you're getting just wiki text or just HTML. Okay, how about all the other metadata that we want? Or how about just actually using that HTML or wiki text in an effective way? These are some of the areas that in the future we're going to bite into and start to add to these schemas. And then on the content integrity front, there's been like a lot of conversation about this post-launch. It's just kind of providing a fuller picture in many facets of, you know, kind of some of the data that our communities use to actually make decisions if something is vandalism or not. A lot of this stuff is because, you know, only we are privy or like understanding of all the nuances of the community. These data points don't make it outside of our community when folks are using them for commercial purposes. So just kind of trying to find and compiling a nice schema to fit into these pipes. So the analogy I've been using is, if we're building a pipe of data right now with kind of dirty water in it, we want to just clean the water over the next through the roadmap of this product, so that folks get a more, you know, optimized view into the wiki world from their end, and they can use more effective data. Yeah, go ahead, Liam. Okay, I don't know how big this is for you all, but actually this is the least important demo slide here. I just wanted to give you, so the place we're at right now is we're in soft beta is what I guess I will call it. We're working with a series of folks that have been interested and helped guide us through this process. There's actually the Wikimedia dumps will be hosting our dumps for community every 2 weeks, so that if anyone's interested to kind of look under the hood and see what we're building, I would deeply appreciate feedback from each and all of you that are interested in doing it. So we're kind of at this phase where we're really QAing out what we've built in these dumps, these exports, these diffs, and kind of starting to play around with the schema like I was talking about. So we have a simple API. It's 3 API endpoints: download a diff on any Wikipedia, or download a dump on any Wikipedia daily, and just an endpoint to grab an individual page. So this is a picture here of just some kind of beta docs of our diffs, like endpoint. So easy peasy. Underneath the hood, and this is the type of stuff that'll be subject to change, but just putting into concrete, we have JSON files for every single article within. We're actually probably going to smash this all in one JSON file, but I thought this was a more articulate way to show it. But this is an example of simple English wiki, which is a good testing one, since it's smaller than large English wiki, but it still has quite a bit of content in it. So this is just a list of all of the articles, and this is the dumped at midnight or a little bit before midnight on 4/19. Yeah, Liam, if you go to the next one. So what's inside of each of these pages, or what does the structure look like? I used Douglas Adams as an example, Q42, many of you might know. So right now our schema is very basic. We're just kind of providing HTML and wiki text, and that's kind of where the secret sauce is too of what's new, is providing HTML alongside wiki text gives commercial reusers the ability to effectively use either or, the best of both worlds in their ingestion feeds to actually take this content and use it. But it also has like a series of other metadata, like what wiki is this from? What is the URL for this, when was this revision modified, the licensing, and the QID, the title. So this is the precise thing that is going to expand over time, but as a beta and a minimum viable product, we're just trying to reach parity with what folks are grabbing from a myriad of APIs right now into one single API interface. Liam, you can move on to the next one. And cool, so all of these map directly over to Wikidata. So in this example, Q42 is mapped over. So typically, the goal is we provide the media wiki IDs alongside the QIDs, and it depends on who wants to use what for their primary key. QIDs are becoming more and more ubiquitous, as we all know, across industry and kind of a single language agnostic view of just a topic. And so including these was a big step because it starts to add a linkage between these two projects that when folks are actually ingesting these feeds, they can go, oh crap, I can go and pull what I want from Q42 and pull it into my knowledge graph in this way. And yes, so this is kind of the summation of what I'm talking about. Super basic schema on the left, very similar to, or this is identical to what I just showed you all for actually this Douglas Adams post. But within this, we'll start to design and bake in things around credibility signals, quality scoring, topic information. There's quite a few different areas in purely public data that we can make a more useful and dynamic schema for the use cases. So just to like go back, like we started all this what my first problem on this project was doing customer research or user research and finding that everybody uses our data, or everyone uses our APIs to get the data, but they have all created their own bespoke solution to actually doing it. The goal of, I would say, enterprise right now is to create a world where there isn't, not everybody has to go and make a bespoke solution, and especially to get us in a place where we can build good product, getting a product out there that is good for most, if not all, folks that are looking to reuse our content in this way. So a data pipe is kind of the first step there, but then just this is where the product becomes fun, is what do we want to include in here? Yeah, so I will pass it to Q&A. And it looks like we have some questions as well, so happy to answer any of these.
Yeah, well, let's start from the first one that came in during the presentation. Was, so the enterprise API falls over at 3 a.m. in California. Then what?
So we're actually hiring up around this. Currently, yeah, we have a team that is able to pick up these tasks at wee hours in the morning, but this is something that we have purposely built this agnostic to the Wikimedia Foundation or the internal pipes of MediaWiki. I think that's probably a pretty important point to say here. We're actually hosted externally, internally, if you're actually talking about the legal element of it, but we are on Amazon Web Services. I talk about that quite a bit in our MediaWiki docs. The enterprise API stopping at 3 in the morning, we're hiring around, or we have a team plus hiring more around that specific problem of how to kind of manage these SLAs. It's been a pretty big part of this team, is we don't want to just create problems for other teams to be like, all right, we're now signing uptime service level agreements. Cool. Now everybody at the foundation or within the movement has to get on board with that. We're kind of inheriting a lot of that within our own world, if that makes sense. So, but we're still defining out the larger org and how it'll work against internal SRE, but we'll inherit that responsibility within our little satellite
I put the link to our hosting documentation in the chat here, but for those watching the video later, it's at the mediawiki.org documentation page, Wikimedia Enterprise subsection application hosting. The next question was, where is it?
What MediaWiki users involved and help out?
Yes.
Yeah.
How can people help out? You said you want help. Where can they go?
Fabricator's great. So we actually recently moved all of our project management flows over to Fabricator, and we have tasks and tickets around all this stuff. That's a direct line to me and the devs working on Enterprise. So anywhere that you have comments or anything of that nature, create a ticket, throw it on our board, and we'll address it.
I should also add, I put a link in the chat here, but on the main page on Meta, Wikimedia Enterprise on Meta, near the bottom, there's a subheading called Access, where you can see the different ways that you can obtain access to the service, both as a paid customer, not just yet because it's still being built, and also for free in different methods. So we've mentioned the database dumps, which will be freely available. That's not the commercially interesting section because it's the same content, but you can see the structure and the format of those every fortnight. Equally, if there's a community use case that is not served by an existing API, then we can provide that access for free to the live version for your personal, non-commercial purposes. Obviously, the scale of this feed is probably beyond the capacity of most people to be able to ingest and deal with and do something useful with. But if you have a use case and you'd like to play with it, then that's perfectly fine. Obviously, for non-commercial purposes, that would be also useful for feedback. The next question was, are there some large technical gaps that still need to be closed, or is this pretty much ready to go?
That's a good question. I'm going to interpret it as I interpret it, but I feel like I could go a couple different ways. I would say there aren't massive technical gaps. I think we're just still working through the flow of a lot of this. I mean, that roadmap roadmap considerations, there's some big things in there to chew on. And I think part of where we're at is we know what minimum sellable product looks like. Sorry to inject startup speak into this project, but we know what that looks like, and kind of our next step is working concurrently on some things to start to tackle some of the bigger problems. Luckily, there's been a lot of good research and work recently around quite a few of the different initiatives that we're looking at. But in terms of the baseline product, I think we figured it out for the most part. And yeah, so it's been pretty smooth so far.
Excellent. Okay, the next question was, has the choice of using Amazon Web Services, AWS, caused any issues within the community? Within the Wikimedia Foundation, I should say. Is there a goal to eventually self-host after the question of server load is better understood?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We talk about that on the MediaWiki page too. My take on this is there's been a lot of really effective criticisms that I find to be a really good input to our process. So the main reason we chose Amazon was actually, or the main reason we chose external cloud was because we spun this up quick to try to figure out if this was a viable thing to do. And as we all know who work on bare metal, that quick and spinning up actual servers is not something that is easy to do in a small time frame. And so we kind of started this as all right, if we're going to do SLAs, we get to inherit a lot of downstream SLAs from this service, but we also get to build this pretty quickly, try stuff out, make mistakes, and it doesn't hurt that much. What we're launching is kind of a larger research, and especially as we have our product more in tune of
sorry, Brian, I should add that it doesn't hurt that much, both in multiple ways. It doesn't hurt the customer and therefore the end user, the reader of Wikipedia down the line. It doesn't hurt our infrastructure internally in the Wikimedia Foundation. It doesn't hurt the staff internally in the Wikimedia Foundation, the site reliability engineering, who would then suddenly get given a whole new responsibility that they didn't sign up for. And it doesn't hurt the Wikimedia movement financially to make this heavy investment in infrastructure, where the payment for that and the setup and the installation would be effectively subsidizing the engineering requirements of the world's largest companies. By putting this over there, puts all the responsibility and the cost over there, which they can pay for themselves, rather than being subsidized by donor money subsidizing the existence of this project. Of course, the setup cost is internal, but that means also we get to design and control the rules of the game rather than outsourcing the rules of the game to the customer.
Yeah, and this is kind of one of the big things we're going to do throughout this over the next year. Is, you know, we're kind of in mode to get the product launched, to get something out that's effective, but also just have a real conversation around where this should live long term. I would say right now it's a pretty true conversation, just the needs and what we're available to do. And I plan to make that conversation relatively community minded, or like have the community's input in that too. So I've worked with Liam on that, but that rolls pretty well into the next question. Is our team hiring? Yes, we are. We're hiring a senior software engineer right now. That role will be pretty focused on kind of a DevOps and data background is what we're looking for. Kind of someone who has like a lot of experience with production systems. Doesn't necessarily have to be exactly similar to what we have built. However, like wiki experience would be great. So this is a really good audience to plug this into. But they'll also be one of the leaders on that above question, is kind of trying to figure out the pros and cons of internal and external, and be one of the strategic minds in some of that work. So if interested, there we have a job. I'll post it in the chat as we wind down. And how important is the structured data within Wikipedia articles, like category tags and info boxes, to the big consumers? I would say the whole gambit. I mean, it's across reuser folks that reuse our content. That is, info boxes are definitely important. Categories are definitely important. Yeah, I guess that's like the quickest answer to that question. The longer answer is, you know, it kind of goes along the lines of who's had the time to put the most work into it. And it kind of goes, how much can you get out of info boxes if you haven't precisely like have an entire team working on that. So it's the whole gambit up and down of like, as we did a lot of this research, it was like, some people were like, that's inaccessible to me. And some people were like, we solved that problem. So it's kind of chewing off what we actually get into from there is actually one of the bigger meta conversations of this project. But I would say all of that is important.
I'll give you a follow-up question exactly on that. Where does Wikidata fit into this?
Where does Wikidata fit into this? I mean, Wikidata mapping over to info boxes versus Wikidata is a common conversation too. And I don't think that's new to anybody. But in general, like Wikidata is a highly used, it's in essence a reuser set. Like the point is not to go read Wikidata, it's to have a structured content store. And so, yes, that is something we're still figuring out, the extent of Wikidata, but some of the stuff we've talked about in general has been around, you know, a much more consumable ontology or schema. Some of that work has been pretty direct requests, I think, across the board. So, but
Next question
folks, yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, go on.
No, you go on. I don't have much more.
Okay, so you mentioned cleaning up the data stream. Is it a different type of data, or is it a sanitized stream, or the company's giving you tools? Sorry, or are the companies given tools to tweak what they see?
Yeah, it's that last part. It's all about tools. I mean, it's right now the feeds are such a raw stream. Like the first and most obvious thing is being able to just say, like, I don't want every talk page comment. That's not what I'm ingesting. I just want the actual article revisions. But in the end, as we like start to actually unpack some of this larger metadata, there's interest in like, well, how about give me updates on things that have less than 100 revisions in the last 2 hours or something like that to avoid hot topics. So there's a lot you can do with just like peeling out and giving tools to have different types of streams, but we're not actually doing much around, or we're not doing anything. I think like a big meta point here, and I hope this is articulated on our product, is we're not changing the data at all. Like the data is what the data is, or like the content is what the content is. And one of the beautiful things about this movement is there's so much available and open, and just kind of like changing that barrier of entry of like understanding what is available is what we're trying to provide in a lot of this. So
that's a really important point, Ryan, that we're not providing a clean feed of content in some way that is a magical solution to how do I find Wikipedia without vandalism, for example. Obviously, reducing the possibility of vandalism being re-ingested by others and then made visible downstream is something that everyone would like, both these customers and Wikimedians. But we're not somehow magically identifying vandalism. What we are hopefully be able to do is provide signals in the data that already exist that allow those organizations to better filter what they choose to show. The example Ryan gave is things that are not being edited right now are more stable and therefore more likely to have not got vandalism right on them. That would be one way of filtering it. But it's not different content just because you're paying for it. That's quite important. Anything we do develop is open source. I've linked there to the GitHub repo and obviously the Fabricator board and etc. And while it's being built independently, it's important that what we do build is available and potentially integratable into the other APIs or however that workflow works. So this is being built in isolation for the reasons we described before, but not in such a way that undermines the usefulness of the existing APIs. Brian has another question in the chat here. It sounds like anyone can use this. Will there be some free threshold limit? Is there a company size limit just in the ability to use the fire hose?
Yeah, we're still figuring this out. So I'm going to give you that answer, which isn't satisfying, but we're in the process of like trying to figure this out. I mean, we're actively working with the Wikimedia Cloud Services world to provide access to folks that have it there within that orbit. But the rest of that, I think this is going to like evolve over time. We're really trying to find that balance of providing this to the community and folks that can get use out of it that aren't commercial, while still having, you know, just managing things around costs and like where this should live in the larger API strategy. And so this is all in flight and will be like updated. You're reaching us at like the moment we go live on, or the moment we release this, we didn't have answers to every single question, which was intentional. because I think we wanted to hear what people actually wanted before we tried to read everybody's mind. But we had answers to some questions, but I think that's one of them that will come in the coming months.
This is a kind of Goldilocks moment, we hope, between having enough answers to have an informed conversation and not having everything locked down to the point that it's just discussion by press release. This is that intermediate moment where the community gets to see what the direction of travel is, which in both technical, ideological, financial directions. The eventual business model for the very large organizations is bespoke for their specific needs, and then the business relationship will be with that, to do with things like the SLAs and the customer support. Once it's possible to then also, once that's stabilized, then we'll also be able to talk with smaller organizations, probably who don't necessarily need those things, or a much less stringent version of those things, which will therefore be much more financially attainable for organizations. So at the very high end, it might be bespoke, but in the small and medium enterprise, or even large tech company, small tech company, which is still large relative to the rest of the world, might be more of a menu approach where you say, I want it for 3 years and I don't need customer support, that kind of thing. We're at time, or slightly before. If there's any more questions, now is your chance. Otherwise, I will hand back to Brian, and thank you to the whole EMWCon team for inviting us. And I hope to see people who are in the audience today in our office hours, which happen every month, or around on our talk pages, etc. We are, as mentioned, going to be hiring for various technical roles over the next, well, hopefully for a long time, but coming soon. And those positions will be advertised on the Wikimedia Foundation board. All employees of this project are Wikimedia Foundation employees. The LLC, as mentioned before, is for legal and technical purposes. It's not like it behaves independently and operates independently. It's part of the Wikimedia Foundation for all purposes.
Yeah, and thanks everyone. And thank you, Brian, for inviting us. This was fun.
Yeah,
and good questions.
Thank you, Liam and Ryan, and Lane for joining earlier as well. This seems like a great pathway to allow the Wikimedia Foundation to be more financially secure. So we wish you the best of luck, as long as that luck doesn't push you over the 30% imposed limit. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.